Hi, I'm delighted that you're here today. This is our opening, and it's good to see so many of you back here in person. Today, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dulce Roman, who is the Chief Curator and the Curator of Modern Art at the Harn. She's responsible for the development and management of the Harn's collection of modern art and art from the United States, Latin America, and Europe. And recently she took on a new challenge. She's curating the huge collection of Florida art that was donated to the museum by the Vickers. And as you may be aware, the Harn is now in the process of building a new wing that will house this extensive collection. Now, a year and a half ago, Dulce gave a talk to ILR on the inaugural exhibition of art from the Vickers collection. And today she will continue with the current exhibit and a continuing exhibit called Florida Impressions. And I think she may give us some other inside information about what's going on with what's happening. Of course, what we're doing is they're now building a new wing. And so that's been a real, I'm sure, a real challenge for everyone at the Harn to figure out quite how to do that. This current exhibit includes about 45 artists who visited Florida in the late 19th century and up through the middle of the 20th century, and includes numerous celebrated artists. It's not just not just Florida artists, but many famous American artists from the United States. Just as today, artists were often snowbirds who came to Florida to escape winter in the north. Okay, and I'm going to leave it there and let Dulce take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Whoops. Well, I see a lot of familiar faces. Hello, I see lots of friends from the Harn Museum and from Gainesville and from my previous visits to Okemuk. I'm so glad you're meeting in person again. This is really exciting. I want to share my enthusiasm and a lot of background about the Vickers collection, which came to the Harn Museum in December 2020. I'm going to show some examples from the inaugural exhibition that Laura mentioned. It was called the Florida Legacy. I'm also going to show you some examples of the works that are on view right now if you come to the Harn in our current exhibition, which is called Florida Impressions. And I'm going to start by sharing background about the collection itself, who Sam and Robbie Vickers are, and what it took to get that collection here to Gainesville. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start with our PowerPoint. So, has everyone in the audience been to the Harn Museum? At least once? Yes. Okay. And have most of you been in the last few years and actually seen the Vickers collection at the Harn Museum? Wonderful. So you're going to already be familiar with a lot of what I'll be sharing, and then of course I'll be filling in some of that with some more background. So for those of you who maybe haven't made it or haven't made it to the Harn in a long time, we are on the southwest corner of the University of Florida campus. We have 112,800 square feet. We have a very large facility. And in terms of exhibition space, we have more than 40,000 square feet of exhibitions. Our main collecting areas include African art, Asian art, modern and contemporary art, and also photography. And then we also have other collections that aren't growing as much, and you may not always see them on view, but we do have Ancient American art and Oceanic art. The Vickers collection the collection came to the Harn Museum as a gift to the University of Florida in December 2020. It includes more than 1,200 works of art. That includes paintings, watercolors, drawings. I can advance the slides from here, but let's go back to this previous slide. Well, It doesn't want to work for me, but that's okay. Yeah, I want to show the entrance to the Harn Museum. You'll see the large cling that we have above the front entrance. Here, above our front entrance, this large cling. This is something new that we've started doing in the past few years, where we pick a signature image from something that's on view in the museum to excite people as they walk by. So if people are going to visit, for example, the Natural History Museum and the Butterfly Rainforest, they'll stop and say, oh, how interesting. Let's go see what's going on in the Harn Museum. Let me learn more about that beautiful image that they see above the entrance. And here you see the actual painting, which is by Thomas Moran and it was in our first exhibition, and it's also in our current exhibition from the Vickers collection. I'm going to next show you this beautiful portrait of Sam and Robbie Vickers. This was taken in the main picture gallery in their home in Jacksonville before the collection came to the Harn Museum. So they were already in the process of making the gift, but the works hadn't been deinstalled yet and packed up for the Harn. Sam Vickers was born in Miami and Robbie was born in Palm Beach. So they are native Floridians. Robbie's family was not actually from Florida, however. They were there on vacation visiting her aunt, and her mother went into labor, so she was almost not born in Florida. Sam is an engineer, and he's CEO of a company called Design Containers, which is in Jacksonville. And Robbie is a talented singer, and she's also a painter, and she has given us about 5 of her own paintings. And 2 of them are on view right now in the Florida Impressions exhibition. So if you want to see and learn more about Sam and Robbie, you'll find more information at the Harn. We have a video in an adjacent space that's on 24/7, always ongoing, and then some of Robbie's paintings. This is a picture of Sam Vickers in their living room. This is the main living room of the house with a gorgeous view of the St. Johns River. You'll see this very thick hanging of paintings, basically from way down low all the way up to the ceiling. The collection includes, I said more than 1,200 works of art. It represents about 800 or more than 800 artists. About 130 of them are women artists, which is really exciting to the Harn Museum because we have felt, as do many museums, that we don't have enough representation of work by women artists. So that was another great bonus that came with the Vickers collection. Most of the artists in the collection are American. Some of them are native Floridians. Some moved there after enjoying winters spent in Florida and decided to move there, but many came for short visits, whether they were tourists like Laura was mentioning, or they came for artist residencies. So you have a huge range of artists and backgrounds and styles that you'll see when you come to the museum and see the exhibition that we have on view now. You'll see the painting over the mantle here is by William Morris Hunt. He was a Boston painter, and he is one of those early artists who came to Florida from the Northeast in the 19th century. He actually came in 1872 and then again in 1874. And painted this gorgeous landscape. Here's a picture of Robbie in the same room, in the main living room. Sam and Robbie have been collecting Florida art for more than 40 years, very, very long time, since the early years of their marriage. And they set a mission, a goal, of collecting work by as many artists who had been to Florida as possible. All the work in the Florida Art Collection deals with the theme of Florida. They may not all have actually been painted in Florida. Some of them are painted based on drawings or sketches that the artist made in Florida and then took back with them and painted in their studios. The Vickers went on a very long process of deciding what to do in terms of a permanent home for their collection. So they realized they were getting up in age. They wanted to find a permanent home. For many years, they met with museum directors and with university campuses in Florida to discuss, well, what would you do if you had this collection? And I think my first visit with the Vickers was back in 2005. But I remember back in 2000, they loaned about 5 paintings to an exhibition that opened, I think, in 2000. It was called The Swamp on the Edge of Eden. Some of you who have been here in Gainesville that long might remember that exhibition, but they did loan a few paintings to that. That was my first introduction to their collection, but my first visit to their home was in 2005. And I just couldn't believe that the Harn actually was able to get the collection, that the University of Florida actually got the collection, because the conversations had gone on for so many years and with many different institutions. And Robbie, I think in the video that's showing at the Harn, or maybe in another video clip that we have, where she says that the educational part of it is very important to them. The mission that the university has as an educational mission, our ability to share the collection through exhibitions and working with students, was really important in their decision. This is a portrait of Sam and Robbie. It's not a traditional portrait as you would think of a portrait. The sitters, the subject, aren't facing the viewer. We don't see them, the frontal view of them. Instead, it's more representative of their 40 plus years of collecting Florida art. So here you see them in that beautiful living room in their home in Jacksonville. Robbie has her arm around Sam. Sam's holding one of their favorite paintings, which is the one by Thomas Moran that's in the cling at the entrance, above the entrance to the Harn. If you come, you'll still see it up there on the cling. So it symbolizes their collecting, their passion for Florida art. Here they are in their home, and some objects in the foreground also represent some important objects that they've collected. For example, this coffee pot is by Harvey Lewis. It's a 19th century piece of silver, a very important piece in American silver. And if you notice here, the reflection shows the Sam and Robbie and also the artist painting them. That's Christopher Still, and he has a studio in Tarpon Springs, so you can actually visit him there and see what he's working on now. Also, there is a book, a copy of The Yearling, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings' book, which is set in North Central Florida. Sam and Robbie own several editions of the book, and they also own a painting by Wyeth, who was commissioned to illustrate the 1939 edition of the book. And I'll show you that painting in a little while. Also, an orange. Of course, we have a nod to the importance of citrus in Florida, the history of Florida agriculture. I want to talk about the frames. You probably noticed how beautifully framed all those paintings are in those images I showed you from their home. There is the painting of the Thomas Moran that Sam Vickers is holding in that portrait we just looked at. And this is a painting by Martin Johnson Heed. We'll look at another painting by him in a moment. But take a look at these frames. These frames are incredible. Sam and Robbie they felt it was very important that all the paintings in the collection be framed in frames that are of the period that the artist was working in. So they didn't want to see a 19th century painting in a 21st century frame or even a reproduction frame. All of these frames are antique frames. So if they received something or bought something that didn't have an appropriate frame, they would hunt down an appropriate antique frame. So these are two examples that show you the close-up. Because usually when we give presentations in PowerPoint, we don't usually show the painting in the frame. So you need to come to the Harn to actually see these incredible frames. But here are some examples. Okay, the next slide. Sorry. Okay, the next slide. Here we are in a different room in their home before everything was packed up. This is the main picture gallery in their home, and you'll notice the very dense hanging I mentioned from floor to ceiling. And Sam said it was a challenge when they would buy something new to find a place to put it because of how tight everything was installed. We made a series of visits to learn about the collection, to get ready to have it brought to the museum. And Sam and Robbie were extremely helpful, giving us a lot of background information on the artists. And they have a story, of course, behind every piece. They remember collecting every piece. And so we want to be able to document all of those incredible stories. This is the director of the Harn Museum, Dr. Leanne Chesterfield, and she'll be speaking with you as part of this series in a couple weeks. She'll probably be talking about the Harn in more broad terms about the different programs and exhibitions that we have going on. And then Kelly Harvey is our Director of Development. A couple more views of those visits that we made in 2020, getting ready to have everything packed up and brought to the Harn. Here, Sam is explaining background on one of the paintings. And of course, there's Leanne again, and that's me standing there listening. And of course, taking notes, trying to document everything that we were learning from Sam and Robbie. I wanted to share some background on the breakdown of the different mediums. As I mentioned, there's more than 1,200 works in the collection. Roughly half are oil paintings, and roughly the other half are works on paper. So watercolors, prints, drawings, pastels, and about 20 photographs. And in this image, you see some of the Harn team during the week that we were there to pack up the collection. This is Tim Dygart. We have Beth Hinrichs and Liz Rogers, and they are making sure that everything is documented and noted. We also had professional movers who did all the heavy work. Most of the packing was done by professional movers, and then our staff was there to help. So here is that gorgeous main picture gallery before and after, with everything packed up. We used all archival materials, of course. Everything was done very carefully. Things were wrapped in archival tissue, and then there was bubble wrap over that, and then they were put into these large cardboard boxes. You can see one of the cardboard boxes here, and then some paintings were packaged into their individual cardboard boxes if they had very delicate frames that needed extra care in packing. Here we are on moving day. This was January 29th, 2021. So the gift was documented in December 2020, but it was that last week of January when everything was packed up and brought to the Harn. And that was a very important date that I will never forget, January 29th. You'll see these large boxes with everything securely packed and then in the truck and ready to go to the Harn. This is one of the art storage areas in the museum. So all the works were tagged. Every work was given an inventory number that we call an accession number. And everything was stored in the database, and the locations are stored. So we know where everything is, whether it's in an exhibition or which art storage room it's in, because we have multiple art storage rooms. And you'll see we have these large, we call them painting screens. It looks kind of like a chain link fence. And it's on a large frame with wheels, and there's a handle here, kind of heavy. I basically have to really lean in and pull to get that screen out, and then you can see the paintings are hung on both sides. We call them side A and side B. And so that's how they're stored. But not everything is stored here. Of course, there's a lot that's on view in the museum. So if we go to the next slide, this was the first show that many of you saw. It was called A Florida Legacy, and it opened February 26th, which means that we had only 4 weeks to get the exhibition installed. And that's pretty quick. So the art that was going to be in the exhibition actually went straight up to the main exhibition hall and was unpacked there. And then the other objects went down into art storage. This is what the exhibition hall looked, though, as we were getting everything ready. You'll see those large e-boxes. We call them, the cardboard boxes are called e-boxes. You'll see everything is in there. And you'll see our staff over here working on getting everything cataloged and sorted. Another activity that we do when art arrives is we need to do a condition report. We want to make sure that it arrived in the same condition that it left from the vicar's home. So everything is inspected very carefully with magnifying glasses and documented. And there's a form for every single object in the collection, every single work, and its condition and notes. And then also a reference image is taken for the database. But then eventually we do have an in-house photographer who has been taking really good photography of each of the works in the collection. So the process here of installing that first exhibition, We lay the works out on the floor, lean them against the wall. The reason you might have a work on the floor is, if we're going to have a double hanging, two works, one stacked on top of the other. You want to see one below it. So we put one on the floor and the other one against the wall. You'll see everything laid out. The curator, so that was me, created a layout and shared it with the staff. And then they laid everything out once it was unpacked according to the diagram. And then I walked around and I was able to make some tweaks if I thought, well, that looks better over here, or let's change this orientation a little bit. And once everything is set, then our staff goes about the work of installing everything. So this is that section that they're working on. This is that section completed. And this became our main title wall. This is before we added the title of the exhibition up here. But you'll see that is the William Morris Hunt painting that hung over the mantle in their living room. So we've looked at that in a couple of the previous slides. Here's another section of the exhibition. This shows everything installed, but they haven't taken out all the materials that are used. Of course, we've got ladders and boxes and carts and drills and hammers and all of that stuff. Once that's all taken out, then we have a huge lift that can go up to 30 feet high so that our lighting staff can go up and change out all the light cans and make sure that there's appropriate lighting on every single object. And so here you see it before the lighting has been completed. And then here you see it with the lighting completed. And it looks very different. It looks just beautiful. So this was our first exhibition. Next, I want to take you through some highlights of the collection. Some of the works, well, all of the works I'm going to show you were on view in the first exhibition. Some of them are still on view now in our current exhibition, which is called Florida Impressions. So let's just get kind of an overview of some highlights from the collection. This is that work by William Morris Hunt that was over the fireplace. I already talked a little bit about this one. But here you'll see some of the beautiful Florida landscape, the coastline. This is the St. Johns River, so it's not really the coast, but it's the St. Johns River. Beautiful sunlight, reflections on the water. It's a very moody scene. I would say it's a very hazy kind of an atmosphere that's creating this mood of contemplation. And there's very little suggestion of any human presence, except for, I would say, this dock that extends out in the background. But if you didn't have that there, you could just imagine yourself transported into some sort of past before there were any development, any building in Jacksonville. And that's something that's very important about this collection, is that a lot of the paintings do document places that have changed dramatically over time, whether it's been through hurricanes or through human intervention, through a lot of overdevelopment. So, and you'll see a lot of landmarks that are also captured in these works, and we'll see some examples. This is a work by Martin Johnson Head, and this is one of my favorites. This is a gorgeous landscape that reminds me of driving in maybe just south of here or west of here. Maybe if you take 441 and you drive and you see some of the gorgeous Florida rural areas that surround Gainesville. This is very reminiscent of North Central Florida. And we know that Martin Johnson Head came to Florida in the 1880s. He was first invited to come by Henry Flagler, who developed, of course, the railroad through the East Coast, and also developed some of the earliest grand hotels in cities like St. Augustine and also Palm Beach. And he developed the Ponce de Leon Hotel, which opened in 1888, and he wanted to attract wealthy visitors from the Northeast. And some of those wealthy visitors are interested in, or were interested in, of course, art and art exhibitions. So Flagler included artist studios and exhibition spaces, and he invited prominent artists to come and spend the winters in his hotel in St. Augustine, so that the visitors could watch the artists paint or have these beautiful exhibitions and maybe buy art to take home with them as souvenirs. And so he was one of those artists. So here we have this gorgeous, dramatic sunset. We have cows grazing in a marsh. It reminds me of Payne's Prairie. Beautiful palm trees. This has all the elements that Northeastern art collectors would have thought, wow, Florida is incredible. They thought of it as a very remote sort of place, an Eden. They didn't know too much about Florida yet. They wanted to see the tropical foliage, the palm trees, the grand sunsets. And so this painting has it all. Another artist who was in our area was Herman Herzog. And he actually spent time around Gainesville. His son was a chemistry professor at Florida Agricultural College in Lake City. A lot of people think he was a professor at University of Florida, but that's not entirely true. And it was actually Roy Hunt who pointed me in the right direction and to the research on that. So there were different colleges that were formed and then became part of the University of Florida. But the one that Herzog's son taught at was actually in Lake City, Florida Agricultural College. And so Herzog made many trips while his son was teaching there. He traveled across Florida. He went all the way down to the Keys, and he painted more than 200 of north central Florida. And here you can see he's interested in capturing the transient phenomena of light and atmosphere. We have an approaching storm in the distance. See the clouds and rain already forming in the distance. Bright light is piercing through the clouds, reflecting on the gorgeous water. This is Lake Alachua, or Alachua Lake. Does that sound familiar to anyone? It's no longer called Lake Alachua, I don't believe, but this is Payne's Prairie. And in the 19th century, the water level was high enough that ferry boats could take passengers and goods between Micanopy and Gainesville. But in 1891, a sinkhole opened up and drained the prairie. And this was covered in news reports in Jacksonville, Gainesville, Atlanta, all over the place, Philadelphia. And there's a lovely quote, something, I didn't write it down, but it's something like, nothing remains of Lake Alachua but the memory of it. So that's another, this reminds me again of the Vickers' interest in capturing images and paintings that do document how some of these areas looked in the past when these artists were here and how different they look today. Winslow Homer, another artist who came to Florida in the 19th century. He made 7 trips in the winter between 1885 and 1909. He painted beautiful watercolors of his visits to the St. Johns River area, Homosassa, Tampa. He even went to Key West. And this is from a painting he did when he visited Homosassa in 1904. So this is actually a watercolor. Some museums classify watercolors as paintings. Some classify them as works on paper, but it is a painting medium, but it's very thin, of course, watercolor on paper. And he was a master of watercolor. He was interested in visiting Homosassa because he had read about it in fishing magazines. So there was already a lot of literature out there on Florida and how wonderful it was for tourism, for fishing, for boating, and it was attracting people who could afford to come in the 19th century and early 20th. Frederick Remington. Now, he didn't come for a vacation or because he had read about Florida in a fishing magazine. He came because he had received a commission. He was hired by William Randolph Hearst to document the Spanish-American War and the activities in Tampa, which was a hub for the Navy and the soldiers and also the journalists. And the Tampa Bay Hotel, which had opened in 1891, was a hub for some of the war correspondents. And it has been said that Remington is this figure here. So he inscribed it. You can see the inscription here. And that's where we get the title from. War correspondents buying horses in front of the Tampa Bay Hotel. So this is the era, of course, before the automobile. So war correspondents need to travel on horseback. So they came to the Tampa Bay Hotel to purchase horses so that they could do their work. Okay, sorry, I wanted to see where I was. The current exhibition also includes work by artists who came to Florida in the mid-20th century. Now, this work is not currently on view, but it was on view in the first show that we did called A Florida Legacy. This is by Martha Walter. And did any of you spend a lot of time in Miami? So you may know this location. I remember swimming here. I grew up in Miami as well. I remember swimming here at Venetian Pool. It was opened in the 1920s, 1924. Martha Walter paints this beautiful, lively image in watercolor of people bathing in the water, sitting on the rocks. You had these gorgeous Italian-inspired loggias, and of course, the soaring palm trees. So she was a Philadelphia-based artist who came and spent time in Florida. I don't know what time of year she painted, but in Florida, people can swim year-round, especially in Miami. So this could be in the winter. Everett Shin. This was a New York City-based artist, and he spent time in Sarasota. And of course, Sarasota is known as the winter headquarters of the circus, the Ringling Barnum and Bailey Circus. And when Shin came to Sarasota, the Ringling Hotel was in full swing. This was a gorgeous hotel that opened in 1926. And then Ringling purchased it in 1930. And you see this dinner occasion with aerial performers. And we as the viewers are sort of at the height. We're definitely above the people who are seated at the dinner, but we're maybe somewhat below the aerialists. But Shin loved painting scenes that showed people and performers from interesting vantage points, whether high up or maybe down low in the orchestra pit looking up, or maybe in the side wing. So this is an example of that. Now, this hotel is no longer standing. Does anyone know where it used to be? Where it was originally? Yes. Oh, you stayed there. It's near the causeway, right? That goes, yeah. Actually, so the present day, it's the Ritz-Carlton on this original site. It was torn down, but if you know the Ritz-Carlton, that's the area. This is what our current exhibition looks like. And I wanted to introduce some of the works that are in here that if you've been to the Harn, you've seen them. And if you came to the first exhibition, you've seen them also. I wanted to give you some background on some of these. Let's go to the next slide. Laura Woodward. This is one of the most interesting artists that I've learned a lot about through the Vickers collection. I didn't know much about her before. We didn't have any work by her in the Harn collection before. And the Vickers had, I think, at least 4 works by her, several oil paintings and several watercolors by her. She was based in New York City. She was known for painting in the Hudson River Valley, landscapes, the Catskills, the Adirondacks, that area. And she spent her winters in St. Augustine, starting in the 1880s. So like Martin Johnson Heade and some of these other artists that were painting at the Ponce de Leon Hotel in St. Augustine. So she was part of that group. And so here we have the Everglades. It's called Swamp Landscape. We're in the Everglades now. She traveled all around Florida looking for interesting places to paint. Her sister was also with her and helping her. I don't think either one of them married. But I can just imagine in the late 19th, early 20th century, going to places like this. We have this serene view, right? It looks like a very contemplative, beautiful, serene setting. We have the palm trees, the birds skimming the surface of the water, the beautiful lilies and water lilies and flowers, kind of a moody sky. But what we don't see reflected here is the harsher realities, what it must have been like for Laura Woodward and her sister to go out to the Everglades, set up an easel and paint, or come with sketchbooks. You know how people dressed back then. It must have been really a challenge, and yet she rose to it. She felt that St. Augustine was becoming, already in the late 19th century, was becoming too busy, too crowded, too many people. She wanted to venture out and see Florida as it was, where people didn't know much about these areas yet. She went to Palm Beach before it was well known, and all the way out to the Everglades. And she also was a pioneer in making postcards. She licensed her images so that they could be reproduced as postcards, so that she became widely known, and some of these areas became widely known. I mentioned to you that there is a painting that is on the theme of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings' The Yearling. This is by N.C. Wyeth, and this is Jody and Flagg. Wyeth was commissioned to illustrate the 1939 edition, so not the first edition, but the 1939 edition. And his son, actually, Andrew, who's also a famous painter, his son, Andrew, was the model for Jody in the illustrations in the book. And there are several copies of the edition, this edition, in the Vickers collection, and there's one that's on view on loan to us right now from Sam and Robbie that you can see in the exhibition. So if you stand in front of the painting, but you kind of step back, you can see the book open to this page, and then you can see the actual painting. You can see them both at the same time and compare. Beautiful, beautiful picture. Another artist who we didn't have represented in the Harn collection before the Vickers collection is Albert Bacchus, also known by the nickname of Beanie Bacchus. And this is his road through the orange trees. Bacchus was from Fort Pierce. He studied art. He had a formal art education, but he also became an art teacher to artists in the Fort Pierce area on the East Coast. Here we see this beautiful image of an orange grove. He's captured the soft light of the late afternoon. The reason I think it's late afternoon is because of the very long shadows that you see as the sun is going down, casting all beautiful shadows and altering the colors and the vision of the landscape with the time of day. He was an important teacher and mentor to a group of African-American artists known as the Highwaymen painters. And I want to show you one of the paintings from the Vickers collection by one of these Highwaymen painters named Harold Newton. We didn't have any work by any of the Highwaymen painters until the Vickers collection. So we are thrilled to now have at least 4 paintings. We have a couple by Harold Newton and a couple by his brother Sam Newton. But there were many more Highwaymen painters. There was an original group of 9, and they started in the mid-1950s and worked through about the 1970s, painting scenes, landscapes of Florida that they would sell out of the trunks of their cars. So they sold them on the roadways. They sold them off of Highway 1 on the East Coast, which is packed with motels and doctor offices and lawyers' offices. In fact, I met a couple who live at the Village here in Gainesville who have about 6 paintings by one of the Highwaymen painters. I can't remember which one. And apparently the gentleman's father purchased them directly from one of the Highwaymen painters for his law office somewhere on the East Coast. So eventually maybe our collection of Highwaymen painters will grow. So some of these artists grew, they taught each other, they worked together. Bacchus was the mentor of several of them. And they eventually grew to include about 26 artists, including one woman painter by the name of Mary Ann Carroll. They sold their paintings for about $20. They're worth, of course, much more than that today. Today, 3 of these artists from the original group of 26 are still living. Sam Newton is Harold's brother. He's still living. So is Roy McClendon and Al Black. Now, Al Black is about 80 years old now, and he was in Gainesville recently because he painted a large mural on Northeast 6th Avenue and North Main Street. Some of you may have seen it. You may have read about it in the newspaper. It took him a number of days, I don't know, maybe at least a week to paint the mural. But instead of painting it on the side of a building, what's going to happen over time? And these are treasures. We want to really preserve the work of the Highwaymen painters, especially those who are working now still. So we actually painted it on huge panels so that when there are signs that it's getting, let's say a hurricane's coming, they can be taken down and put into a secure location, or maybe someday in the future they'll end up in a museum. We don't know exactly the future plans for them. But you can drive by there and see his mural. This is the last painting I'm going to show you before I want to give you a little bit more background about our plans for the collection. This is by Stephen Doanos. It's called Trailer Park Garden from 1951, and it was painted for the cover of this Saturday Evening Post. You see the cover here on the right. So he was an artist and an illustrator. There's another famous painter who's more well-known, who worked for the Saturday Evening Post and many other magazines, and that, of course, is Norman Rockwell. So this is a contemporary. They knew each other. They both worked for the Saturday Evening Post. We have a humorous peek of an elderly couple, middle-aged elderly, not sure exactly how old they are, but they are in their slice of Florida heaven. Their names are on the sign here. John and Lizzie Wilson. It says that they're from Boston, Florida. Sorry, Boston, Massachusetts. There probably is a Boston, Florida somewhere. They have their beautiful little garden here bordered by shells, their flamingo. The gentleman is about, getting ready to go fishing. We have another man here washing his car. They've brought their pet bird with them. You see the palm trees in the background. And this gentleman, who probably is a resident of the same trailer park, maybe he's just gone to pick up his mail, smoking his cigar. So a lot of images that we're familiar with and associate with Florida today, and especially with the snowbirds who come and spend the winters here. I want to show you this next image. Here we have the painting that's in the Vickers collection at the Harn. And here we have a photograph. So what does this tell us? This is so interesting. And Sam Vickers pointed this out to me. So Joseph Steinmetz was another staff artist for the Saturday Evening Post. And he went out to take a lot of the photographs that were published in the magazine. And I don't know who staged the photograph, if it was staged by Stephen Doanos or if it was staged by Joseph Steinmetz. They were probably working on this together. But this made it possible for Stephen Doanos to have an image that he could then take back to his art studio and work on the painting. But you'll see artistic license. He's made a lot of changes. It's not exactly as the photograph. So some of the changes, of course, I think one of the biggest ones is this gentleman here walking in the foreground. Maybe that's to add more element in terms of another caricature of people who come and stay in the winter, or if it's to draw us into the scene by suggesting movement across, or maybe it's to create or to add, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. Maybe because there's a road, you only see the lawn here, but maybe he wants us to have this sense of kind of passing through this community and seeing many different trailers and how people have set up their homes and their areas within the trailer park. Also, he switched out this tree, which is some sort of pine tree. And what did he switch it out for? What do people associate with Florida who don't know Florida or live in Florida? Palm trees. So I love this. Is one of my favorites. And now I just wanted to give you an example of some of the other ways that we're sharing the collection. So right now, if you go to St. Augustine and you go to the Governor's Cultural Center and Museum, sorry, I always trip up the name of it. If you go there, you'll see this exhibition right now. It has about just under 40 paintings from the Vickers collection that is at the Harn. They're on loan to this cultural center in St. Augustine for their main gallery. This at one time was a post office. Now it's a cultural center, and they have a large exhibition space, which previously had an exhibition from the Natural History Museum, which was about indigenous peoples in Florida and colonial settlements in Florida and the history of St. Augustine. And now it's about the artist community and the history of that and how that grew over time from the days of artists like Martin Johnson Head and Laura Woodward going to St. Augustine in the 19th century up until the mid-20th century. So you'll see a selection of works there. And here's another view. And in this image, you see Robbie Vickers Leanne Chesterfield, the director of the Harn, and Christopher Still, he's the artist who painted their portrait that I showed you early on. That was sort of that allegorical portrait of them. We also have been receiving lots of requests from museums to borrow a painting or two for larger exhibitions. And right now, this painting by Frederick Frieseke is on loan to the Kummer Museum of Art and Gardens in Jacksonville. So if you go there before January 1st, you'll get to see this painting there. Now, this painting called Hunting Alligators was on view at the Harn until recently, and then in March, it went to join the exhibition at the Kummer. We're also working with a lot of classes and students. As you can imagine, all the artists involved, the history behind the art communities, the history behind the landmarks, and all the places that are depicted provide opportunities for a lot of integration with teaching at the University of Florida. And a lot of classes have already been coming through. We've had guest speakers from faculty and from disciplines, including biology, English, history, religion, art history, not just the typical art classes, but a lot of different disciplines have been coming and giving talks and bringing students. Here you see a class that is at the looking at the Florida Impressions exhibition, the show that's up right now. And this is a class that was taught by Dr. Eric Siegel, who is Director of Education at the Harn. It was a UF honors class. It's called Florida in the Frame, and Eric taught it in the fall of 2021, so last fall. And here you see the students. There's Eric giving a talk about the Hunt painting that was above their mantle. That's you can't see it, but that's what they're looking at here. And then they also had a lot of behind the scenes opportunities as part of that class. So here they are in art storage, learning about how the collection is stored and cared for. And then this is me with one of my interns. Every semester, I take one UF student as an intern who helps me with a project. And this student is Callum Karolewski, and they were my intern last spring when I was organizing the show for St. Augustine. So Callum helped me select the checklist and do a lot of the research for the exhibition that's at the Cultural Center right now. The new wing. We only have a few artist renderings so far, architects renderings. This is here you see two of them. And when Leanne Chesterfield comes to talk with you in a few weeks, she may give you more background on the new wing. This is our existing building, and this is the expansion. So you'll notice that it will encroach on our existing parking lot. So that parking lot footprint will change. And within this space, 20,000 square feet, we will have two exhibition spaces. One will be for the Vickers collection all the time, where we will show different selections around different themes, and that will be on view all the time. Until the new wing opens, we have the Vickers collection on view all the time. We have a selection of close to 50 paintings on view now, and we'll make little tweaks and changes over time so that you'll see something different. But once the new wing opens, we'll have a much bigger space for that collection. And this is just a rendering of that exhibition space. The second exhibition space will be for other parts of the Harn collection, sometimes related to the Vickers collection, sometimes not related. But it's also going to have, in this 20,000 square feet, a print study center where we can have a conservator come and treat works in the collection that are works on paper. There'll also be print study rooms where UF classes can come and more objects can be taken out for them to look at and study, have classes in the museum, and of course, art storage, because adding these 1,200 works Some of them are still in the boxes that you saw packed up in the house. Some of them haven't been unpacked. They've got their wrappings that have been taken off, but we don't have those beautiful painting screens. We don't have enough of those for the entire collection. So some of them were unwrapped, inspected, they had their condition documented, but they were put back in boxes. So we look forward to the day when we can have every single work hung beautifully on one of those painting screens. And my last slide is just to remind everyone where we're located, what our hours are. Of course, we're free. The only day of the week that we're closed is Mondays. So I hope you will come and visit. And I will leave it here for any questions. I know we have at least 10 minutes left, so you can feel free to ask any questions you might have about the collection, how it came, and what our future plans are. Thank you. Prints would be lithographs. Examples would be lithographs, etchings, engravings, that type. Yeah, I didn't break it down by which type. I grouped them all into the word prints, but there's many different mediums of printmaking. Yes, they collected prints, they collected even photographs. I didn't realize they collected photographs. There's only about 20, but yeah, a lot of different mediums represented.
Well, let's get the microphone out to you.
Did they keep any of the works for themselves?
No, everything that was Florida themed, they gave to the Harn University of Florida. They do also collect antiques, and they have some paint and rugs, beautiful antique rugs. They do have some paintings that are not related to Florida. So they still do have some art in the house. It's just not Florida related. But I understand they're still purchasing art, so we'll see. We'll see what they're collecting now. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Harmon.
Did the Vickers donate any money to help you with storage and restoration?
No, they haven't given any cash gift. It was all the art gift. Right. But they are helping us fundraise for the new wing. They're very active in helping us meet with potential donors. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
When are they going to start construction on the new wing?
Well, it's on the previous slide, it did say that the target completion date is in 2024. So usually it takes about 18 months to get a building like that completed. So they're still raising. I think they've raised about $5.5 million. So there's still a lot to raise before we can break ground.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Didn't the Vickers contribute some money for that construction?
I don't believe they did.
Oh, okay.
No. No.
Okay, on Zoom, Richard, I see that your hand is up, but your sound isn't working. So if you go ahead and mute yourself. Richard, that way, press mute. Any other questions here in our room? I'm sorry, Richard. I know you always have great questions. All right, Laura, do you have any-
There's a chat feature. I don't know if you can see a chat if he types his question.
I don't know if he can do it. Here, Laura. I'm sorry, Richard, your sound isn't working.
Oh.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, wait, now we do. Go ahead.
Good.
I guess I was curious if there was some specification for the new wing. Because if there is, kind of like a special set of exhibits that we're going to put in there, that you're going to put in there, sometime that can help with fundraising. Or is that dedicated space or not? Or what are the thoughts about the new space? in the new addition?
Well, it'll have a main exhibition hall for the Vickers collection. And I think the exhibition space is about, I think there are two galleries that together add up to 6,000 square feet. So I think the exhibition hall for the Vickers collection will be at least 3,000 square feet. So that's a pretty sizable space. Of course, it'll have all the museum required type of lighting. And I'm not sure exactly if I'm addressing your question, but can you rephrase it?
All I was wondering, was that space dedicated to some future exhibition, or is it just a usable space outside of the Vickers collection?
Okay, we haven't come up with our precise plan yet for the themes that will be exhibited, but the main Vickers gallery will be for the Vickers collection all the time. And we'll have rotating exhibitions around different themes. We just haven't developed the actual themes yet. The first one might be similar to a Florida Legacy, our inaugural exhibition, because when the new wing opens, we may want people to see highlights from the different, how broad and all the different themes that are represented in the collection. And then the exhibitions after that will probably be around specific themes. Like we could do one on Florida agriculture, we could do one on tourism, we could do one on artist communities, we could do it on specific cities. So there are a lot of different opportunities there. And then the other exhibition space, we don't have a specific plan for, but it'll be open to other collecting areas within the Harn Museum.
Okay, thank you. Just the one follow-up. Is any museum in Florida going to be dedicated to the rebuilding effort after the hurricane? To show Florida coming back from such a severe damage. Is that an exhibition that would be contemplated for a museum of art or not?
Yes, I think so, definitely, especially at a place like the University of Florida where we could collaborate with scientists and ecologists within the university. That sounds like it would be a fascinating exhibition.
Thank you very much.
Is one of the conditions of the gift is that the Vickers want their works exhibited at all times?
I don't remember if that is specifically stated that way. It does sound familiar. I know it's our goal. So we will always have selections from the Vickers collection on view, always, yes.
And a second question, in the early part, you showed a picture, a painting of tropical sunset. I think it was called by Heed.
Yes.
Usually he puts some red in his works. In the picture, it looks like maybe a brownish. Is that a red?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember. We'd have to well, I'll have to take a closer look. And it is on view at the Harn, so you can inspect it.
I'm sort of hitchhiking on Richard's idea. By building this new hall, will you be able to borrow exhibits that you might not have been otherwise able to borrow?
Yes. So we won't be putting borrowed shows in the Vickers gallery, but we'll have the second gallery, and we could borrow exhibitions for that space. Absolutely. Yes.
Dulce, will this new structure become a new entrance to the Harn Museum?
Yes.
Okay.
We will be constructing the entrance won't change, but the approach will change. So you may have noticed you probably don't remember, but the image that I showed did show the big building, but then there was another square to the left in front of our original entrance. That is actually a canopy so that people can have a shaded area to gather in front of the museum, or if they're dropped off at a circle like they have at the Natural History Museum next door, where they can be covered and not be in the rain. So they're exploring designs like that for the front entrance, but I don't think the entrance itself, the doorway won't actually change.
Okay, I just want to thank Dulce.
Yeah,
That was
you're welcome.
wonderful. And I
You're
think
welcome.
we're all going to rush out to the museum now. So it was great. And we're
Good.
looking forward to seeing how this new wing works out. So thanks for coming.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
that.
me. Thank you, everybody.